Hi, this is Larry Bauer, Chief Executive Officer of the Family Medicine Education Consortium, and I'm pleased today to be talking with Dr. Mark Cucuzella, a family physician who I've known for a long time, who's Professor of Family Medicine at West Virginia University, and he is a faculty member in the Harpers Ferry Family Medicine Residency Program in beautiful Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. Mark, it's good to be talking with you today.
You too, Larry. It's always great to chat with you, and you've been out here to beautiful Harpers Ferry. So
I have.
It's all true. It's a wonderful place.
Yep. It is a wonderful place. So, Mark, I wanted to talk with you. You're one of the pioneers among the family physicians that I know who's really made a very strong effort to address the obesity, diabetes epidemics that are ongoing in this country. And you've been, as I understand it, offering a disease reversal service line within your hospital. And I think people would like to learn about that. So maybe you could talk, Mark, a little bit about your background, how you came to this, and what you're doing in your hospital.
Yeah, Larry, it's such an important topic, and I think family docs and anyone doing primary care, internal med, hospitalists, we're all seeing, the epidemic of, obesity and obesity-related metabolic disease, heart disease, diabetes complications, strokes, all forms of cardiovascular disease, fatty liver, which is now a pediatric disease. Most of them do have root cause and insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia. And, when you go into the physiology of these illness processes, they're not druggable, but you can't medicate your way out of type 2 diabetes or heart disease. You can manage them to some degree, but they are in some way foodable, so certainly what you eat has a huge impact on these illnesses. Prevention, management, and, reversal. So, you can make them go away. And I think we just need to offer patients these options, when they come in to see us, whether it be in the hospital or the clinic, just apply, this isn't, kind of out there stuff now. The 2019, ADA guidelines for nutritional, it's called medical nutrition therapy for diabetes, is acknowledging low carbohydrate diet as the number one method to help patients who have high or erratic blood sugars. It took a while to get to that, but that's actually an important statement. So the ADA now, who used to recommend 60 grams of carbs per meal and 15 per snack for patients with diabetes, all forms 1 and 2, are now acknowledging that maybe you don't have to do that, that there's other options that can manage it. And patients, like with anything, Larry, they just need to know the options. And it's shared decision making, so I don't tell people what to do. I just give them the options and, explain the physiology and support them with what they want to do.
Well, that's great. You told me a story once upon a time about how you got your hospital leadership to go along. As I recall, initially, and this is a few years ago, while this idea was very much people weren't aware of this yet, but you tried to get your hospital leadership, and they weren't so crazy about this. But I believe a nurse played a role in helping, and maybe you could tell that story.
Yeah, so there's been a couple layers of that story, Larry. So I was on military orders 7-ish years ago, 6 months, left the hospital, and my job at that time for the Air Force, and that's part of my acquaintance with you, being in wonderful Dayton and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, I was assigned to try to help people with the fitness test. There was a uptick in the failure rates of the fitness test. A new chief of staff came on board, made the running, a larger part of the test. And if you failed the run part, you failed the test. And, I'd been instructing running in the Air Force for some time. And so they contracted me to come in for 6 months. I was a reservist, left my day job for 6 months. And I started to dig into the root causes of failures and noticed pretty quick obesity was a big one. And I had all my biases that we had learned from medical school. Well, gosh, it's these people just need to, do more PT, right? They need to eat less, exercise more. There must be some willpower flaw in these people. But I was fortunate enough to come across some articles, kind of questioning that, calorie in hypothesis. And I came across an article by Gary Taubes. It was in the New York Times magazine. It was called "Maybe It's All Been a Big Fat Lie," which challenged the food pyramid guideline, brought back, the Atkins methodology of weight loss and explained that scientifically, because he had been shunned by the medical community as someone who was probably causing heart attacks, because, of course, everyone at that time thought, well, eating eggs is going to cause a heart attack, cholesterol is going to kill you. But he challenged that. And then I read his book. It was a 450-page tome with like 1,200 references. It was called Good Calories, Bad Calories. It took him 10 years of investigative journalism, digging up every scientific article probably ever in existence for obesity, including, studies out of Germany before the war, which had never, seen their face in the U.S. And, read that book twice. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. And I started to query at all these military bases I was going to. I'd ask the question, Larry, is anyone, we'd be in a base gym, and there'd be 100 people in a base gym, giving a seminar and running, but we want to address obesity because at that time, obesity in the military, and it still is a huge issue. Over 60% of Air Force members are overweight or obese, and over 60% of Marines are overweight or obese. And, if you were to look at a group that's probably not eating too much and exercising too little, it would probably be a U.S. Marine. So how are they now overweight? Now, some of those folks are muscle, but many of them are over fat too. But I'd ask the question, in the audience, has anyone lost 50 pounds and kept it off for a year? And maybe a hand would go up out of 100 people, maybe two, and you'd ask them, what have they done? And across the board, and this is, 6 months of doing this, probably went to like 50 military bases. They give some answer like this. Well, I got rid of all soda. I got rid of sugar. I did paleo. And at that time, there was no like paleo junk food. That kind of meant getting rid of sugar and bread. Or, they'd say the A word, right? They'd say, well, I did this Atkins thing. And, people kind of turn around and look at them and they, these people looked like super fit people now. And, so that kind of validated there's something real. I didn't have one hand go up and said, well, I ate, a low fat diet and followed the food pyramid or something. And at the same time, just kind of curiously, I was a runner and I'd been brought up, eating the runner's diet. I would probably eat 600 to 900 grams of carbs a day because that's what we all did, and you've seen me out there running the Air Force Marathon, Larry. So that's what I did. And I was hungry all the time and I was waking up in the middle of the night, kind of craving more carbohydrates. And I went in for my military physical. We all just get, just the standard blood work every year. And my A1C was 6 and my fasting glucose was high. It was like 140 range. I happened to get a C-peptide also ordered, which was 0.3, which I didn't really understand that much at the time, but that's insulin insufficient. But I had the fortune to put on what was called a CGM, which is a continuous glucose monitor. And I put one of those on for like 3 days myself. And I noticed immediately, like the cereal and the bread, my sugar would go up to 200 and kind of stay up for a while. So I had a condition called LADA, they call it, which is latent autoimmune diabetes of adulthood, or MODY, maturity onset diabetes of youth. Or there's this nondescript name for people that have more of a type 1-ish variety as an adult. It's 45 at the time. So I immediately on my own started this low carb diet, and I didn't know much about it. There was no keto word, or there were no websites. Like now, everyone's heard about it. It's in Time magazine, and everyone in Hollywood is doing it for the wrong reasons. But no one even had a word for it then, other than Atkins, which kind of made the medical people cringe. So we kind of called it just low carb. That's all we kind of called it. And I noticed immediately, so I started, I wore that for a few days. I could regulate my sugar better. And that was only 3 days I could wear that. That was an old school Dexcom. Now I have on my arm right now, it's called a Freestyle Libre CGM, which is very accessible to the general population. For about $50 for a 2-week sensor, you could see what your sugar's doing any minute of the day. But 7 years ago, these were really only reserved for type 1s and type 1s with good insurance. They're pretty bulky, pretty finicky at the time. But I started finger stick checking, 3-4 times a day, and noticed the foods that could regulate sugar, which is pretty much, meat, eggs, cheese, salads, just no bread. Fruit would send it high. Obviously, any cereal or grain. But I came back to my hospital when I came off that assignment, and there were already hundreds of papers published on the topic, most of them like pre-1970, so before, and certainly several before, before insulin was invented by Banting and Best, or discovered, not invented, Nobel Prize worthy work, and certainly world and life-changing work. For the treatment for type 1 diabetes, there wasn't much type 2 pre-1920. But they knew there was a different variety of diabetes called the fatty diabetes, which were the different body types, right? They look like type 2s, but most at that time who had high sugar were type 1, which was called the diabetes of starvation, because they would waste away while eating 10,000 calories a day. They didn't have insulin, so they would put them on these, severely reduced carbohydrate diets, and they wouldn't die. I mean, ultimately they'd succumb from a complication, but they wouldn't, like we would think, gosh, if you didn't have insulin, you'd be dead in 2 days. No, they would do, some of them would actually do okay, and they would start gaining weight again. Because even new onset type 1s produce some insulin. They'll produce a little bit, but we know that now. They didn't really know that then, but they actually called it the starvation diet, even though it wasn't a starvation diet. It was a diet mostly of meat. There was like these zero carbohydrates. And what they would do is they had glucose sticks then. They didn't have, glucometers. They were urinary sticks. So they would take these people when they discovered them. I think the main hospital they did this was up in Boston. Part of it was with Joslin Clinic also. They would put them on these severely reduced carbohydrate diets until they weren't peeing out any glucose. And then they would gradually add back a little bit of carbohydrate. And as soon as they started peeing glucose out, that was their threshold of carbohydrate tolerance, and then they would bump them down. So this isn't like new therapy. So when I came back to every hospitalist, so for those who are listening who are physicians, if you went into your electronic medical record hospital, order data set, the diet for diabetes, the lowest ones in most hospitals are 60 grams per meal. There is no other option, really. I mean, you could do a calorie-restricted diet, which most people don't adhere to because they're hungry and they're just going to eat. Hard to count calories, but you won't find a carb-restricted diet. So I presented the option to do a 10-gram carb per meal diet in our hospital, check their sugar, and not do sliding scale insulin. So let's just see how this goes. And it was kind of nice. So it was supported enough that they said, well, if you're on service and you take responsibility, we're okay with it. And our kitchen staff got involved, and they made so it's like a electronic medical record phrase. So our low carb diet here is they call it like a dot phrase. It auto populates. It's a 10-gram carb per meal, double eggs, double meat, extra salad, no breads, no sugar drinks. So it's certainly not calorie restricted. Most of the time they can't even finish it. They'll come up because the kitchen staff will put like 4 hard-boiled eggs on a salad, and they're like, "How am I going to eat all this?" I'm like, "Well, just eat till you're full. It's all good." And we check their sugars, and I mean, no kidding, their sugars stabilize, without more insulin. And the nursing staff was super supportive of the education we were giving to patients. And we'd have handouts, but then like everything, unless it's regulated and done correctly, things can kind of go off of protocol. So when I was on service, we would do it right. We'd make sure the patient's educated, make sure they have follow-up if we adjusted meds. But people started grabbing these handouts, using them. Some people use them for weight loss, or here's a nice handout. They didn't understand them completely. And then the handouts started to be used kind of randomly without, really good kind of collaborative education from all sides. And people got a little worried about that, rightly so, and slowed the process down a bit. nurses were being told not to, quote, use Mark's diet, when I wasn't around. And they kind of got a little upset by that. So we met again and we tightened it up, and I actually have an article published on the whole protocol we can share. It was in the journal Diabetes Management. I can send the link, Larry. So it's being done now by other attendings other than myself. What's really cool, the residents are learning it. So when I'm on service, we'll go through it. You have to have the pharmacist involved, because you can't, if someone's on a sulfonylurea, for example, which is glipizide, glyburide, these medications are going to be really dangerous on low carbohydrate diets, because they get low blood sugar. If you don't eat sugar and you give this medication, that's going to drop your sugar irregardless of what you eat. Certainly short-acting insulins are almost eliminated, because this is like meal coverage. Is if you're not eating the carbs at the meals. Long-acting insulins usually are reduced by half. Blood pressure improves. So blood pressure meds, you got to follow that. They get reduced. So it's a medical intervention. It's not a diet. This is an intervention like anything that needs to be done correctly. So, and I thank all the clinicians who've gone before me, folks like Eric Westman, who's been doing this in his practice now for 20 years, from thousands of patients. So they've learned the nuances of the med adjustments. We published an article in the British Journal of General Practice looking at all the diabetes meds if you're on a low-carb diet, which ones are going to facilitate, disease remission, meaning let's try to pull the meds away and improve their diabetes versus add more meds, So any med that makes you secrete more insulin or inject more insulin, is driving your insulin resistance, and your disease is getting worse as your sugar might be getting better. Anything that's reducing your insulin load as a type 2 is helping your disease. So that's what we want to do, is reduce hyperinsulinemia. That's the majority of people we see. Then you do have, like upstairs right now, we have 2 type 1 DKA patients, who had difficulty with the home insulin management, which is pretty complex. And so we want to try to, so type 1 this is all very relevant to type 1s also. And Dr. Richard Bernstein, his book is called The Diabetes Solution. He's been 50 years with type 1 diabetes and doesn't have a complication to speak of right now, still sees patients. And his life story is an amazing one about, the first use of a glucometer and low carbohydrate diet to treat himself. He was an engineer, and he figured out that the only way to manage his diabetes was to not eat a lot of carbohydrates. And he had to go back to med school to actually be able to convince others that this was legit and to be able to treat himself. But he calls it the rule of small changes, Larry. Small doses of carbohydrates and small doses of insulin lead to less fluctuation in your blood glucose and ultimately to stable and normal blood sugars. And that's what I think his belief is, that every patient with diabetes has the right to have normal, stable blood sugars. And I firmly believe that. So that's our default, so our null hypothesis needs to be patients with type 2 or type 1 deserve to have normal, stable blood sugars. Now, if you go back last year and all these debates between the endocrine societies and the American College of Physicians, arguing about, well, maybe in the elderly we just need to accept an A1C of 8 and that's okay because they fear hypoglycemia. And they're not talking about the real issue, which is, well, how do we avoid hypoglycemia? Because standard care for type 2 diabetes is high doses of carbs, high doses of insulin, unstable blood sugar. People get low blood sugar, therefore they're afraid to tightly control them. So the alternate is, let's not do that. Let's try to control their diabetes without them having highs and lows. And that's I think the beauty of these continuous glucose monitors, because that can tell everyone exactly what, a piece of fruit does, like what they're doing minute to minute. So there's a lot of different pieces, but technology, and I know you're a big, proponent of emerging technology. That's simple. So, we have technology now available to help any patient with type 2 diabetes figure themselves out. They need to own it. We're kind of a guide, give them options, give them the tools. Because it's a bear, right? I have a form of it, and, I deal with it every day, but now I think I understand it, and I find joy. Like, people think what I do is extreme, and I'm like, well, eating eggs, meat, cheese, all this wonderful fresh produce I get at the farmer market, like, isn't that what humans are supposed to eat? I don't think that's extreme at all. It's called, like, human food from a farm.
And
I know in Dayton,
and not feel hunger all the time.
No, I'm never hungry, right? At the end of the day, like, I think I need a meal, but I'm hungry if I eat fruit, because then in 2 hours later, my sugar will go up to 200, and then it crashes, and then you're feeling hangry kind of. But if, you eat 3 eggs in the morning, I can go exercise all day, right? Go hike with my kids, and your body's making glucose from fat. It makes glucose. You don't need to eat glucose. But people just need to have the options. For someone who has diabetes, they need to be able to make fuel from fat. That's just the way it has to be. If you're a healthy, well person, you don't need to be on a low-carb diet. Just eat junk food. Just don't eat junk food.
Right.
Eat real food. Right. My kids aren't on a low-carb diet, but they don't eat junk food. But they're teenagers, exercising 3 hours a day. They have the roll with a hamburger. I just don't. And we eat dinner together, and it's all fine.
So just so that you know, Mark, when I decided to celebrate turning 70 by running a marathon.
70, wow. I know, you look like $1 million bucks.
The U.S. Air Force Marathon in September of 2017, and your friend and mine, Joe Scherger, came out, and Stacy Potts, who's up in Massachusetts, she came out, and the three of us ran it together. And when I was a younger buck, I ran 6 marathons, but that was back in the era of carbohydrate loading and all of that. This time, carbohydrate loading. I ran the whole thing and Joe did as well, with a bag of nuts. And that was our energy source, and it did just some fine.
Salt in there. Wow, wow, good for you. You fixed your metabolism.
I think I've been listening to you guys talk, and I just decided that it made too much sense, and I've been following along. So just to let you know, Joe Scherger will be at our meeting in Lancaster November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and he'll be giving a kind of a train the trainer on how to implement disease remission or disease reversal services in your practice. He's now doing that regularly in his practice out in Palm Springs. And it'd be great if you have a chance to come join with us. Lancaster not being too far away from Harpers Ferry.
Yeah, Friday I've got a course I have to do Saturday, Sunday, but we can figure something Friday before I would probably have to fly out late that evening to get to Texas. But that's good. I'm so glad that the family docs need to be the leaders here, because this is not like a single organ system problem. Human metabolism is the heart of every disease, chronic disease, and that's not organ specific. And the beauty of people doing primary care is we don't treat the body like a department store. We're okay, that's a liver problem. And all the people with fatty livers have cardiovascular disease. Like, here, take a statin, and diabetes, here's glipizide. So we just need to know that what's the root of all of this stuff, and manage the root, pull the root out. And patients, and it's wonderful to see patients, when patients come back to us, Larry, and we're all burnt out, right? Like, I'm sure every meeting now is like everyone's burnt out. But what brings physicians joy is when you come back, someone comes back, you're in clinic, doc, I'm on half the medication and my sugars are wonderful. That's a good visit. That makes you want to come to work. And then you talk about baseball or something, because they figured it out. We both have to add I've got to add 2 medications and explain all the side effects. None of us leave that visit feeling good. That's exhausting for the patient and for the doctor.
And I think, Mark, that what's happening is a grassroots movement. We had the Direct Primary Care National Summit in Chicago about 6 weeks ago, and we had Joe Sugar and Wayne Jonas talking about promoting healthy living through lifestyle and integrated medicine. The room was full. The direct primary care are just adopting this left and right. I think in many residency programs now, there's at least one faculty member who is like you, trying to influence the next generation through the residents. So I think there is actually a significant movement that's happening.
It's happening in the military too, with the family docs. I've been to myself, Dr. Rob O, who's a family doc, have been presenting on this topic for about 5 years now to the military family physicians.
So this is now a regular service that you provide through your practice, through your hospital?
Yeah, so West Virginia University was kind enough to, because the big problem was being able to, have a follow-up for patients. So you go in the hospital, you've cut their long-acting insulin down, removed short-acting insulin, taught them about a low-carb diet, and you're going to discharge them. But if they didn't have any place to, if they went back to usual care, you haven't changed anything. So they needed some support to be able to continue this if they wish to continue it. If they don't, they're like, no, I just need my bread. And you talk to them, you gave it a go. But the ones who wanted to continue it, they needed some follow-up to at least transition them, back to another source of primary care, stable sugar, stable medications. And we would communicate with their docs. It's not like we were doing anything rogue. We were just trying to teach them kind of a skill set that there was nothing out there that would teach this skill set, So, they all left with my text message, because this is daily communication on medication doses, what their blood sugar is, so everyone, in Air Force terms, you need a wingman, or wing woman. So you couldn't just let these people have a nice day, figure it out. So 2 years ago, we opened a clinic called the West Virginia University Center for Diabetes and Metabolic Health. I'm one of 4 providers in there from the primary care side that can help people with, this or some nutritional management of their disease, whether they've been in a hospital or they're referred from a clinic, so gosh, family doc out there's got 15 minutes, visit, has someone with obesity, diabetes, who's interested in nutritional management strategies. They can have them come up the road. I'm glad to spend an hour with them, go through it, help them get it. Then they're going to go back to their primary care. So yeah, you need some type of place that's going to help these people, because everyone's going to go off the rails at least once, and you can't, if you don't have any, food's addictive. All these carbs are addictive, and no different than tobacco or alcohol. I've never seen anyone give up an addictive substance, after one conversation, and it all goes, miraculously smooth. And, you may see someone blog online about the patient who just, like, in one day threw out 6 medicines and lived happily ever after and lost 100 pounds in 6 months. And, that probably isn't true, that it's probably not that simple and easy. The stuff you see online are probably the wonderful success cases, but the majority of patients, they struggle because this is a lifelong habits that need to be broken, and dogma, things they've been told, to tell these people, no, it's okay to eat eggs. It's okay to eat eggs. Look, it's okay to eat eggs, and it takes a bit of convincing, because they're all like, oh, isn't the cereal and skim milk the best breakfast, And well, have you ever checked your blood sugar after that? They're like, no, I check my sugar once a week. And it's like, well, just do that, because they have to learn it. They kind of have to learn their own body first. There's different, levels of carbohydrate control based on their goal, based on their level of disease.
Right.
But after, they figure it out. So after, a few weeks, usually they know their patterns. if they check their sugar enough.
Well, that was what I was going to ask. You mentioned the device you said you're wearing right now.
Yeah, so it's called, and I can send you a link. I wrote an article on it it's called the Hypoglycemia Foundation, which is a foundation dedicated to educating people about hypoglycemia. So most hypoglycemia, most patients, even clinicians, think, well, it's low blood sugar, they need sugar. But most hypoglycemia is a reaction to hyperglycemia. It's because they're low because they were high and their second phase insulin response was a little too robust, and so if you look at anyone's continuous glucose monitor, wherever there's a low, there was a high, or they had injected insulin or used sulfonylureas. So yeah, these devices now, the most affordable and easiest and accessible with or without insurance is called the Freestyle Libre, and I don't have any conflict of interest with them. I pay for my own by Abbott. So it's a little kind of coin disc that you just kind of punch on your arm. It's got a little subcutaneous sensor. So it reads the glucose off the interstitial fluid, not the serum, like a finger stick. So it can have about 10% variance. So if you're microdosing short-acting insulin, it's not FDA approved for that. It's pretty close. It'll show you trends, but for most of the people we see in primary care, they're not microdosing short-acting insulin like a type 1. The majority, maybe 95% of diabetes now is type 2 diabetes, which is hyperinsulinemia, insulin resistance. So for that group, this type of sensor empowers them to really take ownership and understand what they eat. So now if they want to, after this, I've had a couple patients really like this who are, on insulin therapy as type 2s, and we've put in the paperwork to get a Dexcom G6, which is FDA approved to be so tightly regulated against serum glucose that you can dose insulin off of it. But it's a good entry level in. Like, say you had like an Apple Watch that was doing something and you're like, that's pretty cool, and there's some next level. I mean, you can sense AFib now, from an Apple Watch. So I think in 5 years, everyone's going to put some kind of little sensor on them that's going to be able to beam. Like, I can follow patients now with their sensors, like I can see what they're doing, and they can figure themselves out. So it's pretty cool. It's like a little dashboard, they text me their curve, and we call it a no-hitter, Larry, when they keep their glucoses in that nice safe range. Type 2, you might have between 70 and 150. That's a win for a type 2 who's had an A1C of 8 or 9 for the last 3 years, and they kind of make it a fun game. They're like, okay, I'm going to see if I can stay in this safe range all day. And then if it goes off, they're able to figure out what they did. Oh, that was, so I just scanned mine right now. I had a bowl of chili that had a little bit of kidney bean in it. When I make chili at home, it's got no beans, just meat, but this one looked pretty good. I put sour cream and cheese, so it's 155 right now. So that's probably not ideal, but I'll walk around and bring it down. But if that didn't have the beans, it was 85 before lunch. So now I know, okay, not that 155 is going to kill me, but if I had a bread bowl chili, like there's ones in San Francisco, with a big bread bowl in the chili. Oh my God, it'd be full catastrophe. But patients don't know that, right? They're saying, oh, it's whole wheat bread or something. And chili is all good, but the chili is like loaded with beans, right? Like this one just had, this one had a few beans hidden in the meat. So, but even then, if you have diabetes, no shit, beans are starch, even if they're natural or organic or whatever the hell you want to call them, it's all the same.
So, Mark, this is called a Freestyle Libre, Libre.
Yeah, Freestyle Libre. If you throw it into and GoodRx. So for anyone out there, even if you're listening and want to get one of these yourself, so through GoodRx, which is a national discount coupon that will pull up your local pharmacies and print out a coupon. You just need, for some reason, they still want clinicians to prescribe these. Insurance will pick it up if you are diagnosed with diabetes. Some require you to be on insulin to be using them, but most now not. Because it substitutes for finger sticks for the type 2s. But if you're even have obesity, pre-diabetes, and you just want to see what your sugars do with certain foods, ask your doctor for one. You may have to pay cash, which would be, last time I was on GoodRx for my region, it was about $55 to $60 for a 1-2 week sensor, which isn't bad. Put that on your arm, and in 2 weeks you'll learn some things. You don't have to wear this forever, but just in 2 weeks, $55, $60. That's maybe a night at a nice restaurant. That you can get this little sensor, and it can read from your phone. So that's what's kind of nice too. So you just put the little sensor on, and most people now carry their phone with them, and you can just scan your phone. It works on Android, works on iPhone 8 or above. Pretty much all the modern phones have an app that you just scan the phone up right to it. Any minute of the day. So you just want to see what, this morning I had a little piece of cantaloupe and it shot it up, but it was a hot morning. I went running and my daughter had some cantaloupe, but that's okay. At least I know not to have half a cantaloupe, but it's kind of cool just to see what things do.
Yeah.
Everyone's
like
different. That. My pattern would be completely different than everyone listening. So I eat to my pattern, and other people need to eat to their patterns.
Right. Well, Mark, this has been just fascinating catching up with you and hearing what you're doing and how you're thinking about this. And my goal is, through the FMEC, is to share with people, let them know what the innovators are doing, and others will begin to follow. And if we can grow a movement in family medicine in particular, but beyond medicine, so that America gets better health outcomes, I think that would be a great outcome of this conversation.
Yeah, and just, kind of one final thought, so I really appreciate here, the support I've had from my dean. You remember Casey Now. I think you came here and met Dr. Casey Now, and my current dean, Dr. Emma Eggleston, is a endocrinologist. So, having leadership support for innovation, allows you to do things that are difficult to do in bigger institutions. We're a small institution, and I think anyone listening, you do your homework, you become your own experiment, take ownership of the issues, create solutions, give you access to yourself of patients. If anyone's doing something that might be considered novel, you need to allow them complete access, 24 hours a day. But I've never had any patient text me at 2 a.m. wanting, me to call in an antibiotic for their child, who I've given my cell phone to. They can find it online if they want. But, the more you give access to yourself, I think the less intrusive medicine is in our lives, because people stay out of trouble, and they're really quick interactions. They share a screenshot of their sugar, them, you make a quick adjustment, or you just give a thumbs up, it's good, stay the course, and then you sleep easier knowing, gosh, wow, these 4 or 5 people that were in the hospital last week are doing pretty good, right? So they're off the launching pad, and then we'll see how the rest of the flight trajectory goes. But, most patients don't have a mission control with, we just hit the 50th, anniversary of Apollo 11. They don't have any mission control, right? They don't have a supportive home environment. Basically, they eat at the office and there's just crap everywhere, drive through. I mean, the world's designed to be unsupportive for someone trying to put diabetes in remission. So they really need you, and you can help them. And you need the leadership to acknowledge that what you're doing is legitimate. And luckily now the major diabetes institutions are acknowledging that this isn't rogue therapy. This is now an option that all should hear.
Well, Mark, I want to thank you for being one of the family medicine pioneers, and I'm glad we had a chance to catch up. It would be nice to get together. You don't get to Dayton as often as you used to, but some way or other, it'd be nice to get together and share a conversation and maybe a beer.
Yes, it's all good. Enjoyed chatting with you, Larry. We've known each other probably for like 15 years, I think. Probably one of the earlier FMEC conferences.
Maybe even longer. Yes.
Yeah, maybe even longer. I know we're all getting 52, so yeah, it's been quite a while. It's good, but you've always been out there pushing the innovations. You're talking about single-payer healthcare, even well before the first Obama administration. This has been on the table. I mean, you saw the catastrophe coming of healthcare costs before people were talking much about it, and chronic disease. Not going away.
No,
undefeated.
That is for sure. That is for sure.
To defeat it. Great.
So, Mark,
okay.
Thank you very much. And I'll send you an invitation to our meeting in Lancaster. Also, we're going to Washington, D.C. for 2020, and that gets you even closer to
Harpers
wow.
Ferry. Oh, heck yeah. Yeah.
So I'll be coming to David and to you to see if you guys would like to be on the host committee for that meeting.
Yeah, DC's close. So, well, I hope Friday I can be there and be of assistance to the conference Friday and figure out how to get out of there late Friday, at least to be part of it and just have a presence and share some of the stuff we're doing.
That's great.
All right.
Mark, thanks very much.
Have a great afternoon.
You too.